All right, welcome back for part 2 of the door conversion. I laid out the template and clamped it down. So now it's ready to router and cut out. All right, first we're gonna cut out where the window's gonna be. So to do that, we're gonna drill holes in the opposite corners, and then we're gonna actually use a jigsaw to cut the hole, and then we'll finish off with routering it out. So let's begin. All right, I rough cutted the window with the jigsaw. Now I'm going to use a router to get even closer. So I'll be right back. All right, I can't cut more until I take the jig off or template and put it on this side, and then I can cut the rest. So I'm going to work on the bottom pieces. On the bottom pieces, I made this just little piece of wood right here that will go in here, so that way when I run it up and down, it'll actually be able to reach one side. And then I'll work on the other side, and then we'll be done with this side. We can flip it over. Let's begin. All right, it took quite a bit of time to route out all the rectangles, and actually I flipped the door and routed out the other side. And I finished the window, so now it's nice and even, fully routed. So now we have to move on to taking off the template and squaring off the edges. All right, here I'm actually just taking off the template and just using a vacuum to clean up any loose sawdust, just to kind of see the edges and what I need to work with. Here are the rounded corners for the rectangle, so I got to square them all off. So let's begin. Here I use a large drywall edger. It has a ruler on and everything, but it worked perfect for the door because it fit the 4 foot, because it's a 4 foot long edge. So I use that to mark off the corners where I want them to meet up. Here I'm using a box cutter. That way I can score the corners, because the top layer of plywood can split the wrong way when I'm using the chisel if you're going against the grain. So here I score it, and then I actually use this chisel and just hammer out the corners. It's a small corner, so it ain't too much of a work. And then I finish it off the whole door. So routering out everything, I made a few boo-boos. You know, it happens. If you don't, then you can probably paint this without putting over plywood. Instead, with the router, it smooths out this particle board pretty smooth, so you might not be able to tell. But if you want a really smooth finish, I used 1/8 plywood that I had laying around. So I cut these 1/8 pieces of plywood to fit in these rectangles, and I used wood glue to glue them down. And before I decide to clamp everything, I'm going to glue these 3 down. That way when I clamp it down, I can clamp all 3 of them down at once, because the clamps don't usually reach all the way in the center of the door, at least the clamps that I have. I just used some scrap wood, laid it out, and then I put a piece of wood across it. That way the clamps on each end can kind of hold all the wood down. And I just finished clamping it. And then I let this dry about 24 hours, and then I flipped it over and did the other side just the same exact way. All right, I had a 1x6 poplar, piece of poplar, and I cut it 48 inches because I'm not going to need longer than 48 inches. So I cut it so I don't have to rip a very long 8-foot piece. I'm going to rip them 5/8, or actually 5/16 of an inch thick, because that's how deep the door is. Alright, now that I cut all my pieces, I put this table saw at a 45-degree angle. And what's going to happen is I'm going to cut this, basically it's going to be equilateral angle. So we're going to strip this and we'll have a triangle here. So let me begin. Alright, if you can see here, I got a triangle. And that's going to be the trim that goes around the door. The little rectangles of the door. It'll sit in there, 45-degree all the way around. And I got a lot more to do, so let me finish this. Alright, so now I cut the corners at a 45, only on one side. Then I'll measure by just using a pencil. Draw a line. And do the same for this one on this side. We'll just stay with one side at a time. Or one rectangle at a time, I should say. Alright, I'll be right back after I cut these. Alright, I cut all the pieces for the rectangles. So now I'm going to put a little bit of glue on them. Just a small bead. And put them on. Alright, once they're glued on, put a couple of nails in them to hold it. Alright, make sure you get on any glue that's coming out. And voila! Now we gotta move on to all the other ones. Here it is. Now I just gotta putty the nail holes and sand it and we'll be done. Here I'm wood puttying all of the nail holes and any imperfections that I may have happen, or I like to putty around the corners and stuff where they meet, so that way it's a nice clean finish. So what I do is actually use the wood putty, put it on one finger, and when I smear it in the hole and like kind of go, make it flat, I use my other finger, clean finger, and go right over it, so that way it takes away a lot of that residue or extra wood putty that you don't need. So when you sand, it'll actually sand a lot smoother and quicker without a lot of sanding. Alright, while I wait for the wood putty to dry on the rectangles, we'll start with the trim on the window now. So I cut the trim of the window a different width because it's going to hold the glass and it needs to be a little bit bulkier because the door is thick. So put that little 3/8 inch piece in there. It's going to look different. So I took the 3/4 inch thick wood and I cut it 3/4 inches wide. So I basically had a 3/4 inch thick square, I guess you can say, because it was perfectly all the way around. And then I put the table saw to a 45-degree angle and cut a small, I think it was about a 3/8 inch 45-degree angle off of it. Next I'll have to nail the trim around the window on one side and then putty it and sand it like I did with the other trim. Alright, now that the putty is dried, I'm going to sand it. I'm going to use 120 grit sandpaper. Sand all the edges and all of the putty used. So you put it on light with one finger and then smear it so it's more flat, so when you do sand, you don't have a lot to sand. See, like, that was quick. I already got all the holes that I put putty on. Got some corners that I did just to kind of make sure the pieces fit nice and together. Like that. Kind of get in there on the edge of the sandpaper. Some of them I put a little bit more than others just because it was a bigger gap. Now, when you run this through a table saw, sometimes you get the blade groove in it, and you use, like, maybe this is a 60 grit. I can use a sanding block or not, or not a sanding block, but just a piece of scrapable block, and just use it like that. You can buy sanding blocks too, but this is easy, and you get these cheaper in the sheets and the packs. And just kind of find the area. sand it away. Yeah. There's a little one right there. That's it. Now just get the sawdust away. And then make sure you get like a paper towel or a cloth, especially like maybe a microfiber cloth, and go over it and then get all the sawdust off. That way when you paint, it'll stick better. All right, now let's start painting. All right, next I have to paint the whole door. We're just gonna paint it white. I'm gonna use a brush obviously for all the corners and everything, but I'm gonna use a foam roller. That way it doesn't give it like a texture like another type of roller would do, like a 3/8 inch nap, or thicker. So a foam roller is actually good for cabinet doors, any kind of doors. So that's all I'll be doing, and paint this all up, and then we'll move on. So after I painted the door, I forgot that one side I wanted to add in the centerpieces of the window. So what I did is I made two trims. One, they're actually 3/4 inch thick, just like the trim around the window already. But they're 1.5 inches wide. So that way, when I cut two angles, 45-degree angles on both sides, it looks equal to the trim around the window. So I attached those with nails and wood putty them and sanded them and then painted them. All right, next I used a silicone caulking and I put it around the edge of the trim that was already nailed on from the other side, as well as in the middle dividers. This way, when I put the glass in, it'll actually create a nice, smooth, watertight finish. It also helps for vibration, for the glass being up against the wood and everything. So once that's in, I silicone the edges of the other trim and nailed them in place. I also painted these trims before putting them on the door. That way I don't get no paint on the window and everything, and I just have touch-up paint for any wood putty or nail holes that I'll have to do later on. And then I nailed them in, put wood putty on, sanded them, and then touched that up. All right, once everything was puttied, painted, sanded, everything, I attached all the old hardware that I actually had on a door prior to the solid core door, which was brushed nickel versus the gold look that was on the original solid core door. So I attached all of that, and then I hung the door. And here's the door hung. Much better than the solid core door. The solid core door, normally, I think you can find them actually for like $50. I've seen them for $60 for sure. But you can find them cheaper, especially like on maybe Craigslist and whatnot. And if you have the hardware, then that's even better. So all I spent was really actually $15 for the glass. All of the wood that I used was scrap wood that I had. So I made it work around all that. So I basically made this cheap solid core door into a $200-300 door. All right, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please hit that subscribe button. If you can, please share my videos so I can get more subscribers, then I can do more videos. And also don't forget to hit that like button if you like this video. Stay tuned for more videos. Bye.